for the RailCats. Contreras crushes this one. This ball is belted. This one's got a chance, and let's go on a cat. Joey Ride! A first pitch crushing, and the RailCats are on the board. It's 5-3.
Hello, RailCats fans, and welcome back to another edition of the RailCats Talk podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Spinach, and today we bring on Chuck Polarek, who is a fan of the game and the RailCats, and also hosts two players of the RailCats family. So, Chuck, how are we doing?
I'm all right. How are you?
Good. I'm happy to have you on. You're one of my go-to guys in the game during the games to go to and talk to because you're always intelligent and behind the scenes of what kind of goes on because you do have a little bit of connection.
I would say I have a little bit of a connection, but it's always a pleasure. Every time you're at a game, I look over, I see you. You either come to me or I come to you. We shake hands and we talk some baseball. And so it's a wonderful thing that we're going to share this with everybody else.
Yes, and we spend anywhere from it could be, we see each other multiple days in a row. It could just be 5 minutes, or it could be the whole pregame, and we're like, oh, national anthems. Now we can go sit down now. So It just all kind of depends, and glad to finally get this going on the behalf of you for the one that kind of came up with the idea. I don't want to take the credit for this one because that's not me. So getting into just a little bit, the rundown of the show is going to be a little bit about Chuck, and then we're going to kind of get into the baseball side of things because he is well versed in the knowledge of the RailCats baseball. So Chuck, why did you become a RailCats fan?
Actually, it was a long path. We got season tickets a couple years ago. I had an option between Valparaiso basketball or baseball. It was significantly cheaper to do the baseball. So I said, you know what? We can get a family pass. At the time, I think it was about $200 and 5 tickets to every game. And why not? If you go to 5 games, it pays for itself, and anything above that is a bonus. And I told Ethan when he was mowing grass, I said, hey, find somebody you can mow grass for, and for $50 mowing the grass, give them 5 tickets. Get them to go out to a game. Well, we ended up using all the tickets instead of giving them away, and it was a great experience. But I'll say this: we started out. We always sit on the first base side, right next to the opposing dugout. We started out rooting for the other team, and enjoyed doing that. The reason why I say that is because I believe that these are younger guys, and they deserve to have some fans rooting for them. And if I can be louder than the home crowd, then the home crowd needs to be louder, right? So that was kind of my theory. But that all changed on a trip to Kansas City where first base coach invited us out to see the RailCats and them play. We made the trip, and I told him, hey, I always root for the away team, so it looks like I have to root for the RailCats. And at the time, Nick came by and said, hey, thanks for making the trip out here, and sat there talking to me for about 20 minutes. I said, Nick Garcia, I can't root against him anymore. So now I know this guy, and so next thing you know, we're rooting for him. And about, I'm going to say about 3 weeks later, we got the offer to be a host family. So now we got 2 guys hanging out with us in the summer. So it's been a pleasure. It definitely, I'd say 2 years ago was definitely a highlight of our life. So
now, for people that are maybe interested in host family, how did that all kind of come about?
One of the Vicky is her name. She is a host family. She came by and was talking to somebody from the Milkmen at the time who she had hosted when he was a RailCat. And said, excuse me, I just want to talk to him. I was his host family. And I said, oh, how do you get to do that? And so next thing you know, I had Georgette and Anthony over there talking to me, and they said, well, it's late in the season. We really don't have, anybody right now, but, we'll definitely keep you in mind for next year. In the next game, the next day, I'm sitting there in the same spot. My phone rings from Gary, and they said, hey, it's Thursday. We're going to have a player for you on Saturday. I was like, oh, well, looks like I need to go get me a bed and a dresser for the room because I had bunk beds in the room. So we made that happen, and Julio Vivas ended up showing up on Sunday. So was a great experience. Great experience.
Well, that's always a positive. Going along the lines of that, I know host families, you're the basically the backbone of what independent baseball, or you want to say partner league baseball is like. What are some of the benefits of being a host family member?
Well, we don't get paid. Apparently, the players thought that we got paid, and I had to break the news to them that no, I don't receive any money for this. The benefits are you get 2 season tickets per player. Um, and you get to go to some outings, special outings for host families. You get a recognition at the end of the year. Those are the monetary or physical benefits that you get that the team provides. Uh, the benefits that you don't realize is I have met some guys that are I'm 47 years old that are more intelligent than I am, and they're in their mid 20s. When it comes to things in life, I mean, think about it. These guys at any given time have to pack up and leave, right? They're either cut or they're traded or whatever. There's no sense of comfort, which, I've been lucky to experience my whole life is comfort, right? And, with that is a different attitude. And so kind of learning that kind of an attitude that they have of, hey, no matter where I'm at, I'm going to play my hardest. I'm going to do my best. If it doesn't work out here, I know it'll work out somewhere. It's just overflowing positivity is infectious. And so that's for me one of the huge benefits. Right now, if it gets loud upstairs, it's because one of the guys, his mom and dad are staying here and with his niece running around. So, we get to. I've had Julio's mom and dad came up and cooked us dinner. We got to have a Venezuelan dinner, which was great. Um, uh, Julio, when he made the World Baseball Classic, I was the second person that he notified. He wanted us to come out, and I got the family treatment going out to Phoenix. So those are great benefits. But I also live my life as that the stuff that I have is mine. God gave it to me. And so I get to share it with others, get to treat these guys with love and respect, get to be the mom or dad showing up to the little league game that their mom and dad can't make it to because of the distance or whatever. And I get to root for them, and show them love that way. So it works both ways.
So if anyone's interested in being a host family member, just talk to Anthony. I know you always see him on the concourse and stuff like that. So, it's a for Major League Partner League baseball, it's a huge thing for what you guys do. So, to me, who doesn't have any host family because I don't have a house big enough for that, I thank you on behalf of the RailCats because it's a big help to them and to the players as well. Uh, shifting from being a host family member to more of a fan still, two more questions about that. What's the favorite feature of the Steel Yard in your eyes?
Oh, I love the way the grass looks. I love the way that the field is taken care of. Noah, to me, is from last year, is a guy that has talent that I can only dream of. To be able to take care of the grass the way that he did, make a field look like that, and then to trade that off to the new Noah, and to be able to just, I mean, it really is peaceful when you go there and you look at the field and you just see that grass and the fact that it brings back a lot of childhood memories of baseball. It's peaceful. That's one of the things I love the most about it. The other thing I'd throw out is I love the seating. I believe that I have the best seats in the house sitting at first base right next to the opposing dugout. Um, got hit with probably 6 baseballs last year. So you're part of the game. Had one this year that an overthrow, I think it was in the first game that Natasha moved out of the way and it busted her seat. So it's not a joke. Um, but I do believe I have the best seats in the game to be able to watch a baseball game.
And the new groundskeeper is Noah Harder, and then I believe it's his brother, Johan Harder. is the assistant's groundkeeper. So the Noah, and then now we got a family tree going on with the grass on that front of it. Now the one thing that if most RailCats fans, if they're going to the game and they hear from the first base side, is uh, a husband and a wife screaming from the first base side, either saying boring or heckling the opposing players, and sometimes the RailCats players.
Absolutely.
What about that makes it entertaining?
That's a great question. Uh, I like the mental aspect of baseball. You really have to be out there if you're a pitcher specifically. You really have to be focused, and you cannot let little things get under your skin. And I could have hour-long conversations with pitchers on. I've asked them, "What are you thinking when you're out there?" Some of them, they're singing songs in their head. Some of them are sitting there just focused on one spot. Can I do it? Other ones are playing games, right? Let me see if I can get them to swing at this, swing at that. So the mentality, the psychological aspect of it to me is phenomenal. And so I try to break that. I try to get in there, and I will yell at the guy with three balls. You're going to walk him, and if you walk him, that's fine. That's better than giving him something to hit. And then as soon as we get the hit, I told you so. I mean, it's eventually you can break in there and you can get to them, and the other team will hate you for it. But then again, they also respect it. So it's to me it's the great part of the game.
What's one of your favorite stories from heckling a player or a team in general?
I so John Sheets, former pitcher of the RailCats, when I was rooting against them, I would go back and forth with John Sheets when he was coaching first base. It was always respectful. It was kind of frustrating and angry, right? But always respectful. And he came up to me and he says, in the dugout, we think that there's people that show up just to root against us. And I said, yeah, we're those people. So specifically, I can tell you Sam Abbott, guy who owns the home run record for the RailCats 2 years ago, would get up there and he would either hit a home run or he'd strike out. And I just wanted Sam to get base hits, hit home runs or base hits, but make contact, right? And so I'd make the comment, he's going to strike out. He strikes out 5 times and hits a home run the sixth, right? Why would you want a guy that's going to strike out all the time? And then all of a sudden, Sammy hits a home run, and John just turns around and claps and says, "I'll take the home run." And so it's great. Now I can tell you right now that John Sheeks comes into town playing for the Explorers, and we're one of the first ones he says hi to. And we love the guy. He really is a great guy, but we credit him for part of converting us to being fans of the RailCats.
Now, with that being said, you're a person that when you could walk up to a complete stranger and have a complete conversation with them. And I think that's one of the great parts of, when I sit there where I normally sit and I look over and you're talking to just random players that are coming out of the dugout. What drives you to have those conversations with those players?
It kind of depends on who the player is, but uh, you're playing independent baseball. You're not playing major leagues where you've got, the fanfare and all of that. You've got the 10,000 baseball cards and all of this stuff, all of the attention. And I want these people to realize that people love and appreciate them playing, right? I actually sent a message to Aaron Takis, who plays for Lincoln. Got to see him a couple of times. We messaged back and forth, but I didn't get to say bye to him. I said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I appreciate being able to watch you play." Right. And he just got a message from somebody else from Lincoln saying, "Hey, it's great to watch you play, even as a Dockhound fan, seeing us lose. It's just great watching you play." And I think that that's what these players they need to hear it. They need to realize that, hey, we're out there and we love them. Whatever team they're with. I'll sit there and I'll watch John West. Very underappreciated. I'll go to Chicago and watched them face the Monarchs, Chicago versus the Monarchs. And the fans on the first base side know who John is. And the kids are like, oh, it's the gum guy, because John will go out there and give gum to all the kids, and he's helping them appreciate the game of baseball. You don't realize the kind of effect that these players have on kids when it comes to their love of the game. And so if we can pay that towards them, right, and show them our love and appreciation, I think it kind of helps them continue to show that love and appreciation with the children.
Yeah, I think it's a big push and pull because a lot of these a lot of the kids and even adults will go to the Cubs game, a White Sox game, and they'll never be close enough to the field to even look at a
Yep.
player or unless get a foul ball. And every time you go to a sporting event or a RailCats game or any major league partner team, you're more than likely going to interact with someone. And that's an experience that most kids that I think fall out of the love of sport in general is just because they don't have that something to look up to and look forward to just because that's never presented to them
Well, it
early
seems
on in their life.
it's unreachable to them. They don't understand that it's right there. And I can I'll use this other example of how I've been able to kind of use my connections with people. I met this kid, Milo, and great young guy, very shy, wouldn't talk to me, but he got LG's home run ball, and LG's dad was with us at the time, and he's one of the players that stays at the house, LG. And I wanted to get the home run ball for his dad. And so I went up to the guy, the kid and his dad, and I said, hey, what would you trade for the home run ball so I can give it to his dad? And the kid was like, oh, didn't really talk. The dad's like, well, we'll think about it. Well, by the end of the game, he had come up to me and offered the baseball. And I said, I'll get you a picture or, signed baseball by LG, something like that. Um, and that was it. That was the end of the deal. But then it was in the middle of a doubleheader. I told him, I said, hey, how would you like to sit in the dugout for the game? And is like, what? I can do that? I said, I can ask. And he goes, well, is that part of the deal? I said, no, we already made the deal. This is just me asking you if you would like to have a new experience in the baseball game. And so he ended up sitting in the dugout. And his favorite player was Woody. Now, me and Woody didn't really ever have a conversation or anything like that. He was one of the few that I didn't really talk to. But Woody was in the dugout at the time, and Milo's sitting there by himself. And Woody walked by him and said hi. And I said, hey, Woody, can he's really shy. Can you talk to him? He's going to be hanging out in the dugout for the next game. And Woody went over there, shook his hand, took him into the locker room, showed him around, introduced him to all the guys, really went above and beyond, you know. By the end of the game, LG had given him back the home run ball. So it didn't cost the kid anything. The kid had an experience that he never dreamed he would be able to have, right? He came up to me, looked me in the eye, shook my hand, which he hadn't been able to do before that, right? Told me thank you. He got the playoff card, the lineup card, framed for his house, right? And since then, every time the guy comes to the game, he sees me, he shakes my hand and asks me how I'm doing. And I've made a friend, you know. Recently gave them some tickets to day before yesterday's game. So game 2 against Canada, Winnipeg, and they so happened to have won that day the Griffith baseball tournament or whatever, right? And started asking about being a host family. And I put them in contact with Anthony. And they're thinking, hey, this would be fantastic, because when you're a host family and you got those kind of mature 20-something-year-old guys, it's a great person to be around your young teenager that loves baseball, and it helps them mature and grow, right? And so just the little thing like that. And next thing you know, this kid is loving baseball more than he ever has. He showed up to batting practice and he has 7 baseballs in his pockets that he had grabbed from home run balls or foul balls, right? And then you would think, okay, here's a kid that wouldn't give up that home run ball, right? He goes around to every kid he can find and he's giving them a baseball, right? I mean, that's what it's about, you know? And it's an amazing experience. And you get that at the steel yard all the time. It's not, this isn't a one-time thing. This is every time you go to the steel yard, you're meeting somebody new. You're just, it's just great. It's a great environment to be in.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I know sometimes it varies depending on the club, but I know Jackson Valera is notorious for once they're done, he turns around, finds the kid, and just throws. I don't know how many balls I've gotten from him, and I've just said I have two. I don't really need any more. I mean, I don't really need them. I'm a grown adult, so a kid can have it. It just when eventually, sometimes you get a ball, and you look around, like, okay, there's no kids here, so I'll just keep this one.
Yep.
But I mean, that's just one of those experiences that you just don't ever get anywhere else. And like you said, it's all the time. And people don't understand it. The one reasons I started doing this was, one, because I wanted to cover a baseball team, but two, it's in Gary, and people give Gary a bad rap, and I've never had any sort of issues going there, and the people there are always kind people. You never have any issues. You may have a couple rowdy fans just because they've had one too many beers or whatever the case may be, but I've never experienced any kind of uh, hostile hospitality
Right.
in
Right.
that sense. So it's always a good thing. That's my main reason that you got professional baseball sitting right there in Gary for people to come to. Um, so transitioning out of being a fan, and one of the things that we really do when we get together is we just like to talk about baseball and Gary baseball in general, and then we have some really good conversations because I see it from one point of view, you see it from a different point of view, and it just makes for a long, good conversation. So what I normally like to do in the podcast is during the season, I like to try to take a series at a time, just because with games every day, there's not a lot of back that time off. So in this, I want to go over the recent series against Winnipeg. Now, granted, when we went to Canada, we took a team that we didn't think we were going to win, and with players that we were depleted with, and we ended up sweeping them. And then we go on this nice little hot streak, and then the hot streak ends in this series as we got swept. Run your we'll look at the series in a whole. What as a whole series, what did you view it as?
Well, I will tell you that I was very hopeful going in, right? When you're on a streak like that, you're winning the series, you're beating some teams that statistically it shouldn't be as close as it is, right? Um, but I think that Lamar has a plan, and I see parts of those, the puzzle pieces are kind of still trying to fit together. So to me, going into that series, very positive. Coming out, uh, lost, right? Um, 2 games where it's like, okay, this can happen, and we don't finish. Now we can equate that to last year, where we have a RailCats team that you could have 5 runs, a 5-run lead in the ninth, and you still didn't feel like you could win this game, right? And so that attitude's kind of changed, but um, it's hard. This series was a hard one to swallow.
Just looking at it as a breakdown from just game to game to game. When we were on the hot streak, there was one game, I think it was the game that we ended up losing against Lincoln, where we gave up more than 2 runs in the first inning. And
Right.
the starting pitcher gave up more than 3 runs in a total of his entire start. And you go into this Winnipeg series, and we all know the common flaw of Carlos Nabria, and how we've all kind of said, I don't know about this. But then we start getting that doubt, and then he comes in and pitches 5 innings and only gives up 3 runs. And it's one of those situations where he has a good outing, he gets tagged with the loss, and now he's 0-8 on the year, and that kind of gets lost in the shuffle of the entire season in general. But we saw what we've been seeing was the offense doesn't produce, and the RailCats gave up that one bad inning, and that inning came in the sixth when Steven Knapp was pitching the first time, and he gives up 4 runs, and it just inflates everything, and the RailCats only give up, they only have 3 hits.
Right.
Like, it's just, it seemed like that game was, at first I thought the game was just, all right, we'll wipe it away. It was a bad loss. We'll take it for what it was. And then we kind of trickle into game 2 where we kind of see the same effect of, Peyton Long comes in and he's had really good outings, and he's also struggled in some outings, but he's been one of the top pitchers for the RailCats, and he was a pitcher of the week. You can't take any of that away from him. He comes off 2 really good back-to-back starts, and then things just don't work for him in this game. But then you saw the fight. He gives up the 5 runs. Then the RailCats come back with 3 runs. They come within a run, and a couple innings go away, and then it turns to the bullpen, and the bullpen has a bad day. Pinto comes in, he gives up 2 runs. He didn't give up a hit. Most of them came off of fielder's choices. And then Nate Alexander comes in when the game's kind of close, and he has his one bad outing. So it just seems like this is what kind of happens. The progression is still there. Me personally, I don't think we lost a lot of momentum from being that hot team that was kind of dominating the American Association, because you face 2 really good teams, and you face the bottom of the barrel team that you should beat in Lincoln.
Right.
But you face a really good Winnipeg team, a really good King County game. That's just kind of keeps going, and then you just kind of stumble.
Right. Right.
In your eyes, in this series, do you see it as just a little bump in the road, or is there something? Are we going to fall back to what we've been doing?
So I've noticed in a couple of games that the team is just mentally they've checked out. You can see when you're sitting on the third base side, you don't necessarily see it because you can't see into the dugout, right? But when you're on the first base side, you look over and you've only got 3 guys standing at the fence, and everybody else is kind of doing their own thing on the bench. They've checked out from the and we had a game a couple series ago where LG winds up getting on base, and he turns around, takes his helmet off, and starts walking back to the dugout, yelling at the guys, "Come on, let's get into this!" Right? And he did the same thing. I think it was game 2 against Winnipeg, where he's like, "Come on, guys, let's get into this!" Right? And it's like, I don't know. I don't know where their head's at. I don't know where their focus is. Um, so I think that it's tough. Am I going to see the same team out there that was rallying? That's when you have the walk off and everybody's running out there, that kind of thing. I was hoping, right? I was hoping, especially the last game where we're right there, right? You're hoping that, okay, let's walk it off and these guys will start feeling some excitement. But I don't see it. I don't see the excitement from the team. Now, that's not to say that the players aren't out there playing hard. I absolutely believe that, the players are out there and giving it their all. But why is it that they're kind of just like, hey, I'm not on the field anymore. I don't need to pay attention to what's going on. I don't know. That to me is the symptom of a bigger problem. How does that change? Wins probably, right? We get some wins behind us, then we get back to going. But you can't win when you only got 3 hits, and then the next game you get like 18 hits. It's like everybody's getting one, even against a good pitcher, They could sit there and replace their pitcher 6 times like we do, and every one of them's given up 4 or 5 hits, and it's like, what is going on here? So uh, is it the old way from the beginning of the season? No, I don't think that it is. Is there something deeper with this team that's an issue? Yes. Um, do we need to see some changes? Absolutely. Uh, is it fair that Sanabria goes out there and gives up a couple runs and then all of a sudden, it still takes the loss? No, but that's baseball, right? He could also go out there and give up 9 runs and we score 12 and he gets the win, right? Also baseball, right? But look at his ERA. Look at his walks. You know, our pitchers are not throwing strikes. That's when you're going up there and you're hitting a batter and then you're walking a batter and then you're hitting a batter. There's something wrong. And let's keep in mind, this is independent professional baseball. These guys aren't playing in the MLB. They have flaws, right? And the key is to kind of put them in places where those flaws don't shine as brightly. Put them in a position where their strengths will outshine those flaws, right? And I don't think that we do that um, the way that we should. You can't have guys plunking batters. Um, you can't have guys walking the bases loaded and expecting your hitters to come through. And maybe that's the attitude problem that we have on the team is that pitchers are like, hey, I'm going out there giving my best, but we're losing. And the hitters are like, your best is giving up 6 runs. And I'm going to go out there and swing, but, I'm not into it. I don't know.
Yeah, I think when I'm going through and looking at these stats, the pitching has improved significantly since May. Be and I say significantly, I'm talking like 1 or 2 spots from the bottom of the barrel. But in in the 9 games of a really hot streak, it's really pulled them from the bottom, but they're still top 3 in batters walked. They still have they're second in batters hit at 38. Their ERA has improved dramatically. They aren't they're third, but they were almost close to 6. They brought that down to 532. The average, their batters aren't really getting a lot of hit. They're average against a 258, which is the middle of the pack of the league. It's you look at one thing, you're like, oh, that's not too bad, that's not too terrible. Then you go over the hitting side, it's they're middle of the ranked with hits, but they're not producing any runs. They're high up there in sacrifice hits, which sacrifice hits are nice, but that's not sac flies, it's not producing a run. Most of that's just bunt overs, or as some people can classify
Fielder's
you got a
choice.
runner on second, you hit the ball to first base, the guy goes over to third. Some people classify that as a sacrifice hit. It just seems like the way this roster has been built, you're starting to see a little bit more small ball, which I've been kind of surprised by. And the more that we start winning, the more small ball that has been being played. Now, granted, you have those power hitters like a Rincon and uh, a Contreras that have helped, but those haven't like excelled us to the wins.
Right.
So, when you're looking at the way the roster's constructed and what the team has done now, should we be shifting our mindset from being a offensive power team to a team that just kind of takes it for what it is? Because I feel like a lot of this team, when we are down by 6 runs, are trying to swing for the fences every chance that they get. And you can't do that when you're down 6 runs. You can't, there's no possible way for you to swing the bat one time and score 6 runs. It's just not possible. Now, 4, granted, but still, you have to be able to get on base. We're one of the lowest in on base percentage. Slugging, yeah, we have more power numbers, but we're still low in slugging, or lower in the slugging. On base percentage, we're the worst in the league at a 311. Uh, that's not; those aren't recipe for success. Stealing bases, we only have 29. So when we do get on base, we're not moving. The next lowest is 40. So, we're 11 off on that. It just, in your eyes, how do you, which way do you see this roster? Which way should they be thinking of going?
Well, you have to have faith in the people that are around you in the lineup. So baseball is a team sport, right? And I would say baseball has gotten away from being a team sport when you have the home run hitters. Then it's like, hey, I can put one up on the board, so we'll do that 10 times. That's not going to happen in the steel yard. And so you really have to find the group of guys that'll work well together, string some hits together, get some doubles, right? And we did that. When we look at our hot streak, it wasn't two guys get a hit, three guys strike out or ground out. It was three guys get doubles, then you have a single, then you have a triple, right? I mean, it was just one guy after another, counted on the next guy to get a hit. There wasn't any pressure on them. You know, go back and look at our losing streaks where you're expecting guys to perform with two outs all the time. Get two guys on with two outs. Somebody comes up and strikes out. Absolutely worthless, right? When we're on a streak, we weren't doing that. And so how do we get better? We have to have the mentality that we can count on each other to make sure that, hey, if I don't do it, somebody else is going to. And I think that's what Lamar he depends on that. If you look at his previous lineups before this year, it was a cycle. He would have two fast guys in case one fast guy didn't get on, the next one would, and then he would have a mid-range hitter, and then he'd have a power hitter, and then he would cycle it through again. Now get me two fast guys, and what have you. So he follows the same pattern. That is a pattern that will succeed. We just have to get to that, rely on each other. The same as with the pitching, though. How many errors do we have? I think we have like 38 errors.
I believe so. Let me double check that real quick. Before we get into that, the one thing I want to take consider, we'll take yesterday as or Sunday. This will probably come out on Tuesday. So on Sunday when we lose in the 10 innings, there was three opportunities. Even we'll just take the ninth for example. Castillo gets on, and you have the one out, and then he got thrown out at third. I forget how that one played out. But then, Contreras gets on with the single, and then Rodriguez hits into fielder's choice, which moves Contreras over to third, and then our Gio Diaz comes in, and Rodriguez ends up getting on because of the I forgot how that all played out, but nonetheless, bases were basically loaded at this point with one out.
Yep.
And Gio Diaz comes in clutch, and he drives in Contreras, and then the next two batters strike out and pop out. Like, all you needed was to put the ball in play, and you weren't really expect that from Rincon, but you kind of expected that from Del Valle. But both of them seem like we're gonna win the game now, and we're not gonna win the game by 1 run. We're gonna win this by 2 runs because I'm gonna swing for the fence. And I think that's been a lot of the issue is we get runners on, even for example, even in the sixth inning, Basabe gets on, Castillo gets on, all with one out, and Contreras and Edwards strike out.
Yep.
The runs aren't, when we have runners in scoring positions, the only player that is producing realistically is Gio Diaz. I think he has like a 321 with runners in scoring position.
Oh yeah,
and
he's doing it.
And we don't have enough of that, it feels like, because it feels like everyone is trying to prove themselves to not just win the game, but prove themselves to, because everyone wants to get that next level to the affiliate ranks. Like it's, if I do this, they're going to look at me for this instead of just taking the game for what it is and take your single with your RBI and move on.
So you get LG at third base, you get whoever it is. We had I'm going to say probably 3 times where we had a guy at third base with no outs, 1 out, right? And small ball, you got to be able to get that run in, and we don't. You know, these guys should not. That's the good thing about Gio. Gio is a team player. Gio will go out there and take the hit in the arm. It'll piss him off, but he'll do it. Gio will go out there and take the walk. He knows that he needs to get on base. He'll steal second. He'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. Some of these guys, you don't get that. And I don't understand why. Maybe it's a talent issue. Maybe it's hey, this isn't in my ball, in my repertoire of what I do. I will tell you, watching batting practice for the other teams, there is a period every time I watch another team where everybody that's in the batter's box is bunting the ball.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They bunt to one side, they bunt to the other side. They bunt to one side, they bunt to the other side. Then they take some swings, then they rotate out. Right? And it's every player. I don't care if it's a guy who's hit 15 home runs. I don't care if it's a guy that's not had a single hit. That's the routine that they do, right? We get Jose bunts, I believe it was Jose Contreras bunts the ball up in the air, right? He's putting the bunt down, squaring away with 10 seconds left on the pitch clock. And the guys are like 5 feet away from him before the pitch gets done. And you can't do that. Right now, we face a team in Winnipeg that the guy swings on the first pitch, right? Fouls it off, I think, and then everybody's like, "Okay, he's not bunting." And then right before the pitch is released, he squares away and he winds up getting on base. Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, there's different ways of how you can tackle something. We have to be smart about it. There was a time on Sunday's game where we had, I believe it was Sunday's game. All these games run together for me, but where we had, I think, 1 out, an opportunity to score. Jason sends the guy around to home. He gets thrown out, and the next batter up winds up getting a single to the outfield, and it would have scored that guy. We feel, I feel like the mentality has gotten away from the next guy can do it, and it's, oh no, we got to score this now because we may never get another chance.
Yeah, I think, and going back to your point about the fielding, is we've committed 38 errors, and that ranks 4th worst in the league. So we're ranked at what, 9th? No, 8th. I think 8th would be.
That should be close.
Close around that. I wish they would have better rankings, but they don't. But that's. But beside the errors, because I want to get into the one consistent part of the RailCats, which is their defense, because they played really good defense. Outside of a handful of mistakes, which we can get into with with Saturday's game, I believe it was. No, it was Sunday's game with the rundown issue with Quintana and all that. We can get you watched it from the stands and I was at home, so we saw 2 different angles on that one. But it feels like it's one of those, they get on base and they finally get on base and it's like, okay, now I have to do something right now. If I don't do something right now, we know the opportunity is not going to come about. And that was a different mindset to when we were winning, in the 9-game span, winning 3 series in a row, having a sweep, right? Really only losing 2 games out of those 9 games. We went 8-2, and you look at the King County series, and we could have swept King County. It was just a flip of the hat at the end of the second game. We had double-digit hits in every single one of those games. Like that, at that point, I feel like the roster they were finally finding their mojo, and it shouldn't have been, okay, we have to panic. But
Right.
that also helped because the starting pitching and pitching in general wasn't giving up 6 runs in an inning. So
Yep.
it feels like everything's kind of going hand in hand, and it's just finding that consistency. And when we find that consistency, we know what we can do in at least 9 games. We just got to extend it out to a further, you know,
Right.
further stance. This was an interesting thing looking at the fielding totals, and when you look at putouts for both third base and first base, uh, I believe Basabe's first at 45. So he ranks overall everyone, and then Jackson Valera's first in putouts at first base at oh man, he now dropped down to third, but he was at 318. Like our corner fielders are spectacular.
We've got
At,
we've got the best defensive third baseman that
yes.
this league has. And I'll tell you, the errors that Basabe makes are errors where the ball is 115 miles an hour off the bat. It hits his glove, it takes a bobble, and then he has to throw it. I mean, that distance to throw from third base to
Mhm.
first on something like that, he has to whip that thing, and it's off the mark. That's where his errors come
Yeah.
from. And if you look at Valera, I don't I don't think that Valera. I don't remember him making an error. It might
He
be that he
he
should have
has
caught but he didn't. But
he has 2 errors. I think one's a throwing error and one was a fielding error. But
yeah,
outside of that, two at first base being 2 errors in general, I mean that it
that's
takes
amazing.
that takes in consideration to every throw that's over there. That takes consideration of every pickoff attempt and every time the ball is hit to you. Like there's
Yeah.
just
Like I will preface this. I don't know that Jackson likes me. I said this the other day. As I always say hi to him when he comes out the first time, and he'll give me this look and that he's always giving the opposing team a hard time or whatever. I don't know that Jackson likes me. I have a hard time making the guy smile. I try. I have a hard time, but I'll tell you what, I'd be hard pressed to find another guy that has the impact that he does on the team.
Mhm.
Um, and playing wise, hitting wise, whatever it is. I mean, that guy, every time you look at him, he's having fun playing baseball. And I hope that attitude, um, from what I see, right? I don't see anything behind the scenes, but from what I see, I hope that would be infectious to everybody else, right? We have the best third baseman. We have this guy on first that's just insanely good at just about everything, uh, and just a great player to have on the team. Um, so you got to look at what those and this is where I was getting at with the pitchers. Let the guys hit the ball because the errors that we have made are not typical errors, right? We've had a few where in the outfield somebody misses the ball. Okay, you're going to get that, right? That's par for the course, right? But the errors that we have at shortstop, um, a bobbled ball here, par for the course. Overthrow a first, it's going to happen, right? But these guys are making the plays. How many double plays have we got compared to ever? It seems like we get those all the time, right? And we're getting pitchers out of jams because these pitchers are putting 2 guys on base with no outs, and then all of a sudden they strike one out, and we get a double play, and we're out of there, right? So I feel as though the pitchers are trying to do too much work. They're trying to get fancy, and our defensive players just need the ball to make it happen. In most cases, I'm not going to say that rundown is part of it.
Yeah, the going back to that rundown real quick. So that was in I believe the last inning in the 10th, or was it the ninth? I don't that's the point streak gets a little finicky after that.
I would have said
Um
earlier it would have been probably in the ninth.
uh
Um,
yeah, actually I think it was in the 8th. I think I have it written down in the 8th because they ended up getting someone out. But in your eyes, from what I saw, was when I coached and when I played. Some argue this, but the main objective is to get the runner back to the base he's coming from.
Yep.
When I coached and when I played, it was if, for example, if I was playing third and the ball was hit to me, I'm immediately throwing it home. Like there's no if, ands, but throwing it home and not running him back, because that's what happened. The ball was hit to Basabe and he kind of ran at the runner at home. I'm like, no, don't do that. I'm screaming, don't do that. He finally gets the ball over, and then I think I forget who was the pitcher at the time was covering, and or no, Quintana had the ball. He starts kind of running him back to third, and then he throws the ball, and who I think Gonzalez was at third covering. He ends up throwing it to Quintana, which at my point, it looked like he was just throwing it to Quintana thinking that he could get him out instead of throwing past him to home.
Right.
From my point of view, it just looked like that's where he was throwing. But you said from your point of view, it looked like Quintana was just kind of in the way, and that was like the only option to have.
Yeah, no, Quintana was in the way on that one. You obviously you want to go for the out, right? But your second option and the safer option is to keep him at third base, right? So I can see Basabe taking a couple of steps, making the runner commit, right? And then throwing it to the long guy that's closer to the bag, closer to the plate, right? Making sure that you're throwing it ahead of the runner. And then you run him back, right? And you try to keep him in that first third of the run path. Okay. Our problem is you've got a guy that starts to run him down, and Quintana's standing there. And if you throw it fast, you run the risk of it hitting off Quintana's glove or whatever it is, right? But Quintana's going to get that ball. I mean, he's just right there in the way. And by the time he gets it and he spins around, that runner's already almost to home plate.
Mm-hmm.
And now you've got to get the ball out of your glove and throw it again and have somebody else catch it and drop the tag. And you've already given it up, right? And so the right play in that case, Quintana should have not been like, hey, give me the ball. He steps aside, you throw it to the next guy, you rotate through. That's the way that that's supposed to be. Now, let's go to what happened right before that. Quintana ain't throwing guys out at second base and third base. And I hope that every team that we face hears this podcast. I'm gonna let them into the secret sauce. You can steal all day on Quintana second base and third base. Okay. So your walk that our pitcher's given up turns into a triple. I'm gonna let it go. Okay. And you can't win games like that. Now, is that a knock on Quintana? No. Is it an opportunity for improvement? Absolutely. Right. And so when they've got a guy on second base and he steals third, who isn't even close. Okay. Now you're in a situation where you've got that pickle going on, which never should have happened. And then the next guy, second base steals third, and he winds up scoring on a play that Quintana didn't get the tag down. Right. So they score 2 runs right there, which both of them should have been sitting on first and second base at the time. So I'm going to say that it's the basics. We got to get back to the basics. And when I'm, as a fan, my response to that was make them do push-ups and make them run laps. Because if they're going to play like a little league team, you need to treat them like a little league team. Right? That's not being disrespectful. That's just me as a fan expecting better out of it. And Quintana should be spending every day on his jump ups, throwing to second base. He should be seeing how much time he can shave off of that throw. If that's not what he's working on, then I don't know what to tell you. Right. And we get Cooper in there. Cooper's throwing guys out. We had a Bockley. Bockley threw out the first guy that he faced that was running, threw him out. If you go back and look, I don't know how many games we were in where Quintana was catching, but he didn't throw out a single guy until we didn't throw out a single runner until Bockley got in there and threw out the first guy he faced. So we can't play baseball like that. You're giving up a bunch of runs. And I hope that they beat that, right? I hope we
Mhm.
solve this problem.
Yeah, and to go back to your point of that game, so some of that I'm not gonna fully the runner stealing third, I'm not gonna fully blame Quintana on that one because Pinto did not look over once. He
Right,
didn't
right.
check him, and it goes hand in hand. It's surprising coming from Pinto because normally when Pinto's on the mound, that's when Quintana does throw runners out because Pinto is the one making sure that the runners aren't getting that extra step or he's stepping off when he needs to. You know, sometimes the when the errors happen or the mental lapses happen, because I think Pinto was frustrated at that point because you just saw it on his face. The runner stole second. I think he ended up walking someone. He was just frustrated at maybe a call because, granted, American Association umpires are not the best, but that's a whole. We could spend a whole
We will.
another
We
two
will.
hours talking about that. Uh, but everyone in the league has their flaws no matter what. That's why they're in the league, but that's beside the point. It's just one of those that situation could have been avoided if you just look over or at that point maybe have a conversation or a sign with the pitcher to have a mound visit or something like, hey, you need to check him. Like it seems like there's a lack of communication and a lack of baseball IQ of the situation.
Well, and that's, who's the general of the field, right? The catcher is. He's the one that's calling the game. It's a lot more than just putting on a suit, right? Putting on the equipment and going out there and catching baseballs. And as a catcher, that's why catchers make some of the best managers,
Hmm.
right? Because they understand all of these different parts of the game and how, these little changes here, little tweaks here and there win you a game, right? And so, in an instance like that, which, hey, these pitchers have issues just like all the players do. It's Quintana calling that timeout, saying, hey, he's not getting a sign, going out there and saying, hey, you need to make sure you're checking second base, right? And all it takes is for that catcher to see a little bit bigger lead for him to say, "Hey, we need to do this," and have that conversation. You should be doing those things. So yes, Julio should have looked over or what have you, but I still put that on Quintana for not controlling that game.
All right. So we get out of we'll say that those would be the negatives of how we kind of feel about the team is maybe the lack of consistency with the offense, the pitching giving up uh big runs, big innings, and just mental lapse. We talk about how good the defense is, but then we sit there and we talk about mental lapse. But I don't think that has anything to do with the physical ability to play the game and how good
Right.
they've been defensively. It's just mental lapse. And I mean that happens. And the one thing, when I talked to Lamar in before the season started, and even when I talked to Brunson, was that Lamar treats the players as professionals, which they should. They get paid to do it. It's a professional baseball league, and a lot of times is when you do hear. There's this one guy. He plays on the Savannah Bananas. He does social media and stuff like that. And he said, when he was, I think in college or when he was in affiliate ranks, I think it was college. He had a coach tell him, he played in the World Series at first base and he had an error. Like he's a professional player, he's playing the World Series, and he muffed a ball. And he said, you're going to make mistakes, so I'm going to keep hitting you the ball until you correct that mistake. And he didn't, belittle them. But I think sometimes being a little lax and not pressuring people can also lead to complacency and being, oh, it's okay. Because that was the one thing I asked Brunson last year. I said, who's the hurrah guy? Who's the guy that goes in the locker room beating on a trash can, when a game, he goes, none of us, because Lamar Roger wants it to be a professional environment. But I still think you sometimes need a little bit of fire, even if it's not from the manager, maybe it's from an assistant coach, just someone to give that little bit of fire, you know, beneath the team,
Right.
to re-engage the team, even when you're, down by 6 runs. Sometimes you just need that little spark. And I think the one person that plays that spark is LG Castillo. There was one time recently he walked, he looked at the team and was like, let's go. Like, this is
Yep.
the time to do it.
Yep.
And I think you need a balance of all that. And I think the now, granted, I'm not in the locker room. I don't know the leaders, but from the perspective looking out, I think Jackson Valera is that cool, calm, collected, every day. Just I'm here to play baseball. I'm the oldest guy on the team. I just love playing baseball in general. You see him, he takes his mitt off. My wife hates it. But takes his mitt off, talking to the umpire, and then right before the pitcher starts his motion, he got the glove back on and he's ready to play. You have Gio Diaz, who may look pissed off as all get out when he's walking out to the field. But he's just focused. He's
Yep.
focused on what his job is and what his task is in hand, and he's just a focused, loves baseball, eats it, breathes it, sleeps it. That he was. I told him I'm not afraid. He is probably one of my favorite RailCats players to watch because he just comes in with the tenacity of I'm going to make every day better than it was the day before.
Yep.
Not baseball's a humbling sport. Not all the time are you going to have that happen, but that's the mentality you get. And then I think LG Castillo is the guy that looks over and says, I believe in myself and I believe in this group that we need to start doing something now. And I think he's just that back half of when he knows something big can happen, he tries to get the rest of the team engaged. you know, do
Agree with
you
that.
do you kind of see that? Who would you quote your leaders on the team as someone that sees?
Well, I think that LG is a guy that wants to win.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to say the rest of the guys don't want to win. That's not a fair statement. But I'm going to say that he wants to win, and his actions towards the team show that, right? So when you see him get on base and he's like, "Guys, come on, why isn't anybody paying attention to this?" That kind of thing. You Yeah, he's that guy. He's 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 got friends that are in the show. You know, he hates the fact that at the beginning of the season he's watching them play and he's sitting at home, stretching out, getting ready for RailCats baseball. He knows, and he's been around enough of the guys to know what it takes to get there, right? So for him to be here and see that these guys need to be riled up, I'm sure sometimes it kind of pisses him off, right? But he's also one of those guys that's gonna be like, guys, he says this over and over to me. We're all on the same team. We're all in the same league. No matter how we got here, doesn't matter. Whether we were pros in the show or we were guys that just straight out of college, we're all on the same level. Let's all play hard. Let's win. And reality is, like you said before, some of these guys play like they want to, like they're looking for themselves to move up. Nobody is watching the Railcats when they are losing like this. I don't care how good you are. Nobody is sitting there saying, wow, Gio Diaz is fantastic. He needs to be an affiliate ball when you're losing like this. And I'll be honest with you, Gio Diaz should be an affiliate ball,
Mhm.
right? I'll make that comment. But nobody's looking at that when they're losing like this, you know. So um I think that you made the comment about Lamar wanting to be professional. I don't think Lamar has a problem with celebration when you're winning, right? I think Lamar has a problem with losing and excuses, right? So Quintana, it so happened that I had moved from my first base position to behind home plate to get a very good view of that rundown. And as soon as we get out of that inning, Quintana got stopped on the stairs by Lamar, and Lamar was pissed. and he was letting them have it, and rightfully so, right? Um, is there too much negative? There has to be when you're losing like this. How do we get out of it? Guys start relying on each other, play as a team. You can have the worst physical team out there in the American Association. I should say the least talented team in the American Association. That if you're playing together and you're relying on each other and you're coming through for each other, you will win. That's it. That's the formula. And we're not there. We don't have the least talented team in the American Association. We've got a very talented team. We just need to put the pieces together and rely on each other and stop making it me baseball. There is a me and team, unfortunately,
Yeah.
right?
There's no I, but there's an ME.
Right. And we play a lot of me baseball. That sucks having to say that, but it's the truth. What's the good points though? Let's get to some good points.
Let's get some positives.
We can't sit there and look at the negatives.
No.
So,
And that's the hard part is, I've been doing this for 3 years now. This is my third season doing it, and it's it was funny because when I first started my second year, I was actually on with Kevin and Rob, who do the This Week in Association. They had me on, and Kevin asked me, he goes, "So, what do how do you keep going when a team's not succeeding?" And at that point, I was just so new to the environment that I was unaware of how bad the situation was. And now that I've finally gotten another season under the belt and understanding it more, it's the small positives. I said this in a couple podcasts a week or two ago. I said you don't want to get too high and you don't want to get too low. It, when the team is succeeding, like when we were on the 9-game streak, I didn't want to be like, oh yeah, we're just the best team in the league because we're doing this, this, and this, and this. It's you gotta kind of come back down to reality. But flipping it on when the team's not succeeding, you have to look at the small positives out of the
yep.
situation. Is defense has been outstanding outside of the couple mental lapses. Yeah, you see any ball that goes any which way, players are hustling for it no matter what the situation is. You can't tell me that there has been one player that has decided to just give up on something just
Right.
because he just wants to give up. There's none of that. You don't have any of that. You're looking at some very exciting batters when they are on hot streaks. Jose Contreras right now is on an absolute terror, hitting home runs left and right. I think he had 5 straight multi-hit games. Carlos Rincon when he's going, Gio Diaz being Mr. Clutch when runners are in scoring position. Uh, LG Castillo when he's had a bit of a up and down year, but when he's going, it's very exciting baseball to watch, and when he gets into it. So I think there are bits and pieces that are exciting. Even the Winnipeg series, when we go out there and we have the visa issues and we have Howard Rodriguez tearing up the 3 games and keeping, earning him a spot. Like there's always looking at a young Anders Diaz starting as a reliever, now becoming one of the ace of the ball club just because he's been able to produce at such a high level. Young guns like Peyton Long, who's coming from the Pioneer League, figuring stuff out up this way. Uh, Yohan Valdez, even though it's weird to say because it doesn't feel like I've seen him a lot because we haven't seen him, but we've seen him a lot. But he's one of those players that I've always liked to watch. He gets excited on the mound. He's a positive. Nate Alexander had a couple lapses, but realistically, his numbers, he hasn't really given up more than 3 runs and more, he gives up maybe a 1 run every so often, but he's been a solid piece. Like there's positives. It's just sometimes the negatives outweigh the positives. But what are some of the positives that you see from the team?
Well, I'll start off by saying this. At the beginning of the season, I was on the fence about Lamar. You see a season and a half, or 2 seasons, but really a season and a quarter were his. still had players from the previous regime. But I didn't really see the pieces and how he was trying to put them together. I'm convinced that Lamar is the manager that needs to be in place. So that's good, right? And the reason why I'm convinced of that is because if you look at the talent that we had 2 years ago compared to the talent that we actually have on the field, I believe that it's a huge increase. And that's the vision that Lamar sees, right? Not everybody that comes from affiliate ball should be playing baseball, right? Not everybody that has an arm injury should be out there playing baseball again, right? And so Lamar takes some chances on some guys, and unfortunately, sometimes those chances fail, right? But Lamar is the type of guy that he looks for the talent, and he sees things that maybe somebody else doesn't, and he works towards getting those strengths, right? So to me, that's a big plus. I'm going to put a big plus on the Lamar cap. Okay. And I think that a lot of people will disagree with me on that. I would say probably 8 out of 10 fans will disagree with me on that, but I'm going to say that's plus. Another big plus that I would say is the fact that there is a big stigma over Gary, Indiana, but we're overcoming that. Going back even as much as last year, like you said, I have conversations with other players on other teams, right? And the conversation, Nick Anderson with Lincoln, I think he's with Lincoln, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, he is. His response to me last year was, "You're in Gary, Indiana, right?" Really talking down the fact that it's Gary, Indiana. Now, if we look at the crime rate, we'll see that Lincoln, Nebraska is actually higher than Gary, Indiana. So, but it's the stigma, right?
Mm-hmm.
It really is. It's the stigma of Gary. I will say this. You can go to a RailCats game and you will be safe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there you go. If your worry is that I'm driving through Gary, then you probably have other things that you need to think about. Because the drive to the RailCats Stadium is extremely safe. But players didn't want to play there. And, their thought is from what they see, there's nothing in Gary to do. There's nothing in Northwest Indiana. I don't want to spend 5, 6 months of my life out there. I don't want to be there. And Lamar has got people calling him, trying to get people on the team. So he's worked in changing that stigma and bringing in quality guys. Now, are they the pieces that fit into the puzzle? Not necessarily, right? But the fact that he's changing that stigma and he's really making people realize that Gary's a great place to play. So to me, that's a plus. These are long-term pluses. Right? Last year, I had a conversation with Hector Sanchez. I was so excited. Hector is such a great guy, and he really is focused on helping others and stuff like that. You saw him play. He played for the Milkmen, and then he played for Cleburne. Then he got traded to the Milkmen. They made it into the playoffs, and then he played for Kane County, and they made it into the playoffs. And I asked him, "Would you play in Gary?" He says, "Absolutely." And I'm like, "You'd play in Gary?" He's like, "Yeah, I'd play in Gary." I said, "Do you think you could help these catchers? Because we always get these young catchers, and it's all about shaving that time off that throw." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I absolutely see what they're doing wrong, and I could help them." Stuff like that. When you've got a guy who has won a World Series with the Giants and he's willing to come and play, that shows that there's pluses, right? Unfortunately, he's playing in the Mexican League now. So to see that come to fruition wasn't something that happened. But I think Lamar has played a big role in changing that. We do have some of the best fans. I don't know that there's another team. I take that back. Fargo does have I can't remember her name, but the big fan that she's just all over the place for them. But Gary has guys that travel all over the place with him. And you ask yourself why? Because we love baseball and we do love this team. So there's pluses there on the field. That you can take a talent like Andres Diaz and you can put him as a starter and you can let him shine. I go up to him every game that he pitches. He'll be standing outside the locker room, and I'll go up to him and shake his hand and say, "Hey, great game, thank you." Right? Um, and he says, "Oh, thanks," and what have you. Talent like that, he's to me, he's our all-star guy. Chris Irwin, injury, comes back this year, starts off early, which maybe not a good choice, right? But feeling good. I just had pretty much the same surgery that he had. I'm feeling like crap. I'm like, man, seeing a guy like that pull through and be able to go out there on the mound, um, good stuff. His attitude, great. He wants to play baseball. So we've got some good stuff. It's just I look at it as a puzzle. The pieces aren't necessarily formed. Um, Putting those pieces together, that's all that it's going to take. Making some changes, it's there. Season's not over with yet. We can still come back. I was looking at, I always look at the transactions of the other leagues and look at our former players. Um, Send messages to the former players, asking them how they're doing, stuff like that. Alec Olin gets traded from the Valley Cats to uh, Evansville, right? And I'm like, man, they picked up a good guy, but I also see that they picked up another outfielder. And then I looked that they got like 3 other transactions that they've made, trades or what have you. And I'm like, man, that is a lot. And I look, it's because they're in last place.
Mm-hmm.
They're making changes to try to save the season.
Well, that's an era of the Taggart era, because that's where he's at now. Is he's at the Tri Valley, Tri City Valley, Tri City. That's they were on a bit of a good streak, and they kind of fallen off on that front of it. But that's the thing is going back to the point of having a plus next to Lamar Rogers as the manager is I to this day have not seen one reason why he should be on the hot seat. And I haven't seen it. Yeah, the numbers don't show it. There hasn't been progression, but anyone that covers this league, or covers the league, or covers independent baseball in general. This is coming from Nick and Ryan, who do a fabulous job that I was on 2 weeks ago with, of them talking about Lamar Rogers. And when I was on with him, he goes, they don't see him as the issue. It's the production of the players.
Right.
But when talking to Lamar, he's finally making those connections. And I think what you're running into is right now the connections are players that he managed for when he was in the Houston organization and didn't know that he was in the league, or still managing. So that's where you're getting the Sanabrias from. That's where you're getting the Perez's, the Sierras from. It all started with Miguel Sierra, was the one that kind of started to catapult all of this players that are coming in. I know that, granted, the players that I've mentioned haven't really done much production, but I think that's led to a Carlos Rincon coming in. That's led to a Contreras. That's led to a Marcos Gonzalez coming over and figuring all like the pieces are coming, and it's just a matter about the production side of things versus having the Taggart era where things were going on a slow decline progressively every year. And everywhere he's gone, take Winnipeg last year, for example, they had probably the best 2 players in the American Association in Crows and Max Murphy, and they went from making the playoffs to not being in the playoffs again. He
Yep.
goes to Tri Valley or Tri City, where the Frontier League is his style. He starts bringing his guys over. Olid leaves Fargo to go play with Tri-City because he sees Taggart as a father figure in his life and someone that he'll follow, and it's just not working.
Right.
So I think where we're at with Lamar is he's figuring it out, and he's just got to figure the pieces. The pieces have to come along with the puzzle. I think he has. You look at the puzzle. I think he's got the outside working. Now he's just working the pieces in the middle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, you look at Taggart. I don't like his management style. I don't like the way that he approaches the players, talks to the players. I've only had a few instances, but all of them kind of made me think, I don't know why somebody would be chasing after this guy. But uh, that being said, the loyalty, I think, only with him only goes one way. They're loyal to him, but then he's quickly not loyal to them. And the fact that you see a handful of players that he uh, put on the team that were previously Winnipeg guys, that were previously Gary guys, and then he cut them or released them, or traded them, right? Kind of shows to me that there's not that, hey, there's not that loyalty. Or maybe as a manager, you're saying to yourself, I can try to make this work, but you don't have the big picture. So you're putting people in positions where they're not going to succeed, and that's the big thing I see with Lamar is that I think that he puts these players in a position to succeed, but they're not doing it. And that's not on him, right? And I think that's what uh, maybe the fans miss is
Mm.
that this is a guy that should be killing the ball. Strikes out 3 times. Uh, that's not Lamar. That's not Lamar up there holding the bat. Uh, so that's but to see these other guys, um, my point was Evansville. Evansville went out and traded for a bunch of guys here in the past couple of days, because they realized that if we trade for people, we can still be in this, right? And I think that Gary's in that same situation.
Mhm.
We need to trade for some guys. Um, I don't know that I necessarily see a real weakness in our staff as far as the field goes. We need another catcher. I don't know that what the trade power is with Quintana, but it to me maybe his stay at Gary has lasted a little too long. Let's bring in another quality catcher. You've got Cooper that can use some help, but he looks like he's a guy that's a get at it. Let's make it happen kind of guy. And you've got to make some changes in that pitching staff. And all the teams are doing that right now. If you look at the transactions, those are the transactions all the teams are making. Even the teams at the top, they're making pitching changes because they know I need to get better at this spot. And that's where we should be. We shouldn't be static in what we
Yeah. And here's another food for thought as this came through. Um, this was reported with the Indie Bell report. They have upped the price in visas between transactions. So it's gone from $500 to $1,000. The biggest issue with this club and a lot of people that are struggling are visa issues. They're on visas. So it's one of those that, okay, I'm going to spend anywhere from $500 to $1,000 on this player. I have to see it through to see if it's going to work. So I think that plays. I think that's the part that we all kind of miss because that's a part of this that maybe not all of us fully understand, and that's something that I like that I'm interested in. Is those are things that prevent maybe another player coming in because you're trying to see this through. I spent $1,000. It's like spending $1,000 on a an RC car, right? And it's just not working the way you want it to, but I spent $1,000 on it. Like I just want it to work the way so you're trying to make the tweaks to it to make it work the way you want.
I can see uh I can see that view from us, okay? Because to us, $1,000 is a big deal, right? And we would probably spend a lot of time focusing on and doing the research that's involved to buying that RC car for $1,000, right? And to alleviate ourselves from making a mistake like that, of getting the wrong one, right? But um, this is baseball. You're never going to be 100% sure of what you're getting. And, like Trevor Lubking, right? We're one pitch
Mhm.
away from not being able to play again for a while, right? And so no matter how much money you put in, there's still that risk. But uh, oddly enough, at the Steel Yard, we just had our congressman there yesterday. And uh, I went over and where he's throwing out the first pitch and this and that and taking pictures with everybody. And I went over there and I said to Brandon in the dugout, I said, "Hey, Brandon, how crazy it is that we have the congressman right here and we can't get our visas approved for Mariaga, right? How
Mhm.
crazy is it that we have the guy that can help make these things happen for us, and yet we're whining and dining him with the first pitch and all of this stuff, and he's out shaking hands, but we can't get a visa approved. We can't get Mariaga here, stuff like that, So there's a lot behind the scenes, I'm sure. Um, think of this: the RailCats also cover their flight and that home and the flight here, and I'm sure that a flight to Venezuela is not quite the cheapest, right? And stuff like that. But I think that's all just the cost of doing business.
Yeah.
Um, you know, but that being said, there's a bigger issue here that could come into play, and that is um, you bring in a guy and uh, you make a bad choice and you get rid of him and you bring in another guy and it doesn't work. And you bring in another guy and it doesn't work. I don't know how many times you can bring in a guy and have it not work before somebody else says, "Hey, you need to stop being the one that's bringing in the guys." Right? That's the bigger issue. That the bigger risk that we run, I think,
Mhm.
is that we we take a lot of chances on these guys that are coming out of arm surgery or that have been released from affiliate ball, and we jump on it and then we find out that, oh, well, they throw 105 miles an hour but they've got no accuracy, and we just made the same mistake that affiliate ball team made.
Mhm.
It's uh it, I'm sure that there's more that goes into it, but from the high 30,000 feet, it seems like maybe we don't do the scouting reports. Maybe we're just hopeful. I don't know.
I think maybe a little bit of that is a lack of maybe a baseball operations. I know not all independent baseball teams have it, uh, but there are some that do, and because the general manager is typically your day-to-day operation and take care of the visas and the paperwork and stuff like that, so your manager is left with managing the team and trying to find players. So I think maybe some of that could come. You need a person from the outside going, hey, maybe we shouldn't take this guy because of said A, or we should release a guy said B because of these bullet points here, and take yourself out of that situation. Granted, that always doesn't happen because you have to build it from ground level, and you may have to go to a college kid to say, hey, can you want to start this program up and it's going to be for free, and we'll give you credits for it and maybe something can come of it, but majority of the time the funds are getting funneled somewhere else.
Right. Right.
So moving things along, I took up about an hour and a half of your day. This is probably going to be about 2 hours before this all wraps up.
Well, we're good.
Um, but going into the All-Star, getting ready for the All-Star break because that's coming up. Um, who is a pitcher and a player, or let's put it this way. Who would be your pick, hands down, to go to the All-Star game?
Andres Diaz. Yeah, I think Diaz absolutely has shown his stuff. I think he's probably top six pitchers in ERA. Um, the guy's money on a regular basis. Now that I've probably said that, I jinxed it, but he's money, and you can tell. You can tell. He's out there coaching first base, smiling. He's focused on winning, um, but he's out there doing it. So he's my guy. Fielding, however, uh, I I struggle. I don't know that right now we have a fielding guy out there that's making the All Stars. I don't know that we have a guy. I mean, these other teams are running guys that have 320, 330 batting averages, and um, how do you compete with that when you're running 260, 270, 280s, right? Uh, Gio's a clutch guy, but Gio's also the number one batter, and that's not necessarily the guy that you rely on to be the clutch guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does Gio make it? He got snubbed last year. I absolutely think that he was deserving last year, and it really frustrated me that he didn't make it.
Thanks, Brian Torres.
Well, yeah, and you see where Torres is at right now. Torres batting 330 something in double A after 250, 270, 280 at bats. If that doesn't shine a light on the American Association and the talent that we have in this league, I don't know what does, right? But Gio's right there. Gio is right there with the same talent as Torres. Um, Gio's in a situation where he can't excel the way that he is capable of excelling. You can't have a slow guy at the end of the lineup and then Gio comes up and he's got a slow guy in front of him so he can't steal bases. You also can't have, Gio gets on base and the runner or the batter swings at the first three pitches, and doesn't give him an opportunity to steal a base. Those things are getting tweaked now, but that's something that happens regularly with him. Um, but like I said, you don't see him complain about it. You don't see him. He just goes out there and plays ball.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you, in a conversation I had with him, this is Gio's mentality. I play in the show. Okay. I play for the Major League Baseball. It might not show it in my paycheck, but it is going to show it in my attitude and how hard I play. Right?
Yeah.
That's his attitude. I'm going to go out there and give my best, no matter who's signing the check, no matter who's out there in the stands watching. I'm going to play my best because I want whoever it is that see me to see me at my best and know what they're getting. That's
Yeah.
Gio.
Yeah, no,
No?
and for me, I know you tweeted at me the last week and you asked who my all-star person
Yep.
was, and I said Carlos Rincon just because I want to see him in the home run derby. Like that's just me, and not really, and me not really digesting the situation because you tweeted me in the middle of work, and I'm like, I gotta hurry up and respond to this. I'm sitting in my truck going, who do I? And I was afterwards going, yeah, really it should have been Anders Diaz, and he is my guy to go to. I mean, he's played in 13 games. He has six starts. He has a 4-0 record. I think he has the most wins on the team. He has the lowest ERA of qualified starting pitching at 3.37. He's pitched 42 innings, 34 strikeouts, 16 walks, and 39 hits. Like the walks are the most impressive part to me is how low he can keep the walks down. Looking over his games, I mean, he has a couple that are inflated. The game against Lincoln at Lincoln, he gave up 5 runs, but outside of that's the only game that he's given up more than 5 runs. And other than I think when he was relief pitching against Milwaukee early on in the season, he pitched 2/3 inning and gave up 2 runs. Like that inflates the ERA quite a bit, going from a 0 down up to a 5. But he took in from that point, his highest ERA was a 4.26, and that was a loss to Kansas City, where he pitched 4 innings and gave up 3 runs and 2 were earned. But other than that, he's dropped it down to a 3.38. which now at 337, however they want to put the math into that one. He has been the best relief or the best starting pitcher from a relief role into to a starting role. But I started fumbling with this with the player, and I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, and I said Basabe or Marcos Gonzalez. At the time, they were both hot. They were both batting in the 300s. They were productive on the field. They were driving in runs. They were the driving force behind the team. Now those two have kind of cooled off, but Marcos is after uh, Rincon really kind of cooled off. The numbers are still there for Marcos Gonzalez as he leads the team in runs scored. He's second in RBIs. He leads the team in walks. He's second in OPS. He leads the team in on base percentage. Like he's leading a lot of the offensive side of things that may kind of get missed unless you start diving into the numbers a little bit more. Uh, those would be my two to kind of go to the All-Star game if we were sending them. And I really think it's probably going to come down to what it's been the past uh, 2 years is we'll send a pitcher and then we'll vote in a hitter. That's
Right.
just kind of how it's been. I mean, that happened last year with Irwin, and then LG gets in because of the fan vote. It happened with Lingua when he got voted in. So I think that could probably be the recipe for success on our portion to send two people to go. But I do have a handful that could be also, a Yohan Valdez, Josh Smith, and Nate Alexander when you look at their games individually and you look at in a course of things, there's a lot of ones and a lot of zeros, more zeros than ones. Uh, with relief pitching, you can't really look at the ERA because sometimes you could have that one bad game and it inflates everything and it
Right.
doesn't tell the entire course. Um, as far as batters, I kind of went with four. I went with Carlos Rincon, Basabe, Jose Contreras if he can stay hot, and Gio Diaz if he can stay consistent the way he has in this homestand. We're still a couple weeks away from the All-Star game, but I'm pretty sure they're going to start announcing the All-Star rosters here shortly. So for some of these players, it's like, all right, can you stay hot? And you could potentially get in, but those would kind of be uh my couple that I would say that could
Those
potentially
are
get in.
those are solid. Those are solid picks. Uh, Marcos recently kind of cooled off. Um, but he still gets those clutch hits. He gets on base, you know. Unfortunately, when he gets on base, there's two outs, and it doesn't lead to much sometimes. But I could see the pull for Marcos. Um, it seems the saying the rising tide lifts all
Mhm.
boats, right? When we've got three guys that are hot, you can't help but have five guys or six guys that are hot because the pitchers don't want to pitch to these guys, so they want to get the guys out that they can, which gives sweeter pitches to those other guys, which causes them to get hits. It's this is a 90% mental game.
Mhm.
And batting orders matter. Strategy matters in putting these pieces together. And unfortunately, when you've got four of your top guys that aren't hitting, it causes the other three or four guys to also not hit. It's unfortunate, right?
Yeah.
Um, so, but if we're disciplined at the plate, then those three, four other guys get walks. You know, I think that go back and look. I wonder what our plate discipline is, walk wise, stuff like that, to strike out, swinging, that kind of thing for some of these games where we get blown out. You know, because I feel like you were saying before, we swing for the fences. I think that not only do we swing for the fences, but we swing at pitches that aren't there. You know,
Yeah.
and it's crazy because when we are hitting, you'll see that we're also getting walked. You know.
So kind of a bit of a sabermetric reading it how it is. So it's basically a walk to strikeout ratio. And Quintana actually has a .739, which is really good. He walks more than he strikes out. Um, well, he's still technically, I think he strikes out more than, however, it divides itself up. But after that, it kind of drops to half. So like more people are striking out versus walking. And that's what hence why we have a 311 batting on base percentage
Right.
versus other people, just because we're not taking our walks. Even when you look at walks to plate appearances. Uh, the two guys that are, well, one guy's hurt and the other guy we released were Sierra and Bockley, who have a .117 and a .122, and then it's Quintana, and then it's kind of so on and so forth. So like we're still not getting on base. We're not getting our walks, so it means we're just not taking the pitches when we need to. The other one that I like to look at is the runs created, and that's basically takes in consideration of base hits, runs that you produce, sack flies, and everything like that. And we only have three guys that are in the 20s, and that's Rincon, Gonzalez, and Basabe. And then Goldeyes is just underneath that. So, like, we're still not producing a lot of runs. People aren't creating the runs when they've had the opportunities to.
Right.
That's here nor there on that one. We'll start to kind of wrap everything up here. Real quick, players to watch in the second half.
I think Geo stays strong. I think that LG has gotten to, what is he batting, like 260, 270. LG is a 300 hitter, so I think you're going to see him wind up hitting a streak. Um, Rincon, I think he's hurt. He's been not really running out the first base. Uh, and I do see kind of a grimace on his face every once in a while when he's running. So I think that you're going to see him cool down quite a bit. And some changes need to take place there. Same as with Valera. Valera's been kind of hurting too. I can see when he's running. So um, hopefully, hopefully they get a little rest and they, heal up and they become strong. I see a guy like Valera, if you give him a little time off, I think he comes back stronger. But yeah, I got LG, Geo staying steady. And then I'm gonna say Contreras with playing time. Uh, he really so far he's kind of made you double look, take that double check. But I think that his bat's true. I think it's going to stay. And maybe that lineup needs to be tweaked a little bit to put him in a place where he can kind of use that power or get those better pitches. But wouldn't be surprised if Contreras kind of just takes off or continues to take off.
Yeah, this is just the trend of Contreras. So if you take his last 10 games, he has taken his batting average from when they played in Winnipeg from a 152 to the last game against Winnipeg at home to a 277, and has taken his on base percentage from a 204 to a 310. And
Yeah.
his lowest that he's been was the first 3 games of the year where he wasn't getting, or 4 games of the year, wasn't getting a hit. Finally got a hit, had a .77 or .077, and now he's at uh, a 277. Like his improvement has just been out of this world on that front of it. Goldeyes, his numbers are starting to go up. LG Castillo's numbers are starting to go up. Like those productions that we've seen from last year are finally coming through, and those are just positives for the offense for the RailCats. Now it's just if Basabe and Valera and Gonzalez can kind of get back to being what they were before, this team will take off. So going from the all stars and the players to watch and so on and so forth. When we look at the league in general, who would in the East, who do you see as maybe the toughest team?
Oh, Cleburne.
I would agree with that one.
Um,
That's
the reason why I think it's the toughest team is I think that their schedule kind of uh there's a big pro to their schedule of playing team 6 games in a row that they can take advantage of, whereas other teams don't really pay much attention to that. Also, they've really got an advantage to that heat that they're used to, whereas other teams aren't. And they got O'Grady. I mean, that guy is like killing it. And Hill, all those guys are
Hmm.
they're stacked. So how could you? It's not a fluke when you put up like I don't know 70 runs in in 6 games. That's not a fluke for them.
I'm just looking because they jumped. They were in the middle of the pack. Now they're first in the East. Um, but just looking, yeah, I mean, they just got done with the series with Kansas City. Kind of got muffled around, but they had a 18-11 win over Fargo. Uh, there's just games where they were I forget, I think it was a Lake Country game, or not a Lake Country game, Milwaukee game where they were down by a bunch of runs and they just lost. I think it was 8-7. They were down by like 8-1 and they came back to make it, one run game or they get as a Cleburne you could just never count out just
No.
because their offense is just they could just go off at any moment.
Yep. Yep.
Do you see them as the toughest team in the league? Also, is there someone from the West that you would say that's probably a tad bit tougher?
Um, I would say that the biggest challenge is Cleburne. If I was going to go on the other side, we've got Fargo coming up, and we haven't faced them yet, and they always seem to pull something out. Uh, they've got solid pitching, and I don't know. They always seem to find a way, and that little girl when she shows up to those Fargo games, man, she just annoys me. I feel really good. I say annoying in a great way, right? I feel really good that she's such a fan of baseball. Um, but the other part of it is that she can sit there and jeer our team and be right. And I'm like, oh, I can't really say anything about that because you're correct.
Yeah. Who was it last year? I forget no, it wasn't Pina Colada, but it went off the same uh I can't think of the guy's
Oh, it
name.
Pina,
Yeah, Pino,
jalapeno.
and then she would say Colada after. Yeah,
Yeah,
so like it's just that always intrigues me on that side of it on that one. But just looking here as we talk, uh, in the East side, it's Cleburne that leads at 27-20. Kane County's a half game back. Milwaukee's 2 games back, tied with Chicago for third, technically 2 games back. Lake Country is 7.5 games back, and Gary is 8.5 games back. Looking at the West, Sioux Falls leads at 27-16. Fargo's 2 games behind. Winnipeg's 5.5 games back. Kansas City's 7, tied with Sioux City at 7. And then Lincoln Salt Dogs are 12 games back.
yeah, that's
That's and that's before we wrap this. That's another thing I want to point out that the RailCats schedule has not been the easiest.
oh no.
Like we went
That's
from Lincoln, who we should have taken care of, I think, in both series, but didn't. But then you go to Winnipeg, and then you have King County. Like you take the way those wins, but now you're going Winnipeg. Now you're going to face Milwaukee again. Like the schedule hasn't been the easiest.
yeah. I mean, well,
And
if
granted, I mean I'm just saying we haven't. I would like to take another shot at the Dogs because I think they're a winnable team now.
absolutely.
Lake Country, we took 2 out of 3. We haven't seen them again.
They
We
haven't
played the 2 series against Lincoln and we ended up splitting that. Okay, that is what it is. But I'm just saying we haven't seen, we only played Sioux City once this year because we
right.
played Winnipeg three more, or two or another time. So like you don't get that. We took away Kansas City, so like Kansas City has kind of struggled. I'm just saying I don't think the scheduling has been a big favorite at the beginning of this year.
No, no, and it seems like it's this way quite often that we face the teams that wind up being really good right
Hmm.
off the bat, and we don't know that they're really good yet, right?
Yeah.
Or we're trying to figure something out when we face these teams and we fail. But that being said, uh, let's look at the East. We can beat Chicago.
Mhm.
Chicago has a couple of guys that are their team, right? And so we could beat them. Milwaukee, uh, absolutely. That should be close every time. If we're putting our best out there, they're putting their best out there. That should be close, constantly. And I think that the one pitcher that I really like on their team, Rodrigo, I
Mhm.
think is his name, Benoit, or Benoit. He just got loaned out to the Mexican League, I believe. So you don't have the fear of him.
Mhm.
Last year he was a guy that came in, pitched. I'm going to say 1,000 miles an hour, and you couldn't get the bat around fast enough, and they were strikes, right? So you don't have to worry about that, even though he's not as good this year. So Milwaukee's close, but you can take him. We just
Mhm.
showed we can make a run with Kane County,
Yeah.
and I think that scared Kane County because they're like, what is this, right? We thought this was going to be easy, and this is far from it. And then that leaves Cleburne, which we've already gotten the first six out of the way with them, and the next six are at home.
Yeah.
They're not going to have the benefit of the things that they have when we play them in their home. So um, I think that the second half is uh, doable. I'm not
Mhm.
going to say it's a walk in the park. It's not, and it's baseball, but we make these changes that need to be made. We tweak some things. I'm not saying overhaul everything, but the next half is very doable for us.
So any final parting shots I should say. I guess let me put it this way. I like to the first time that I have someone on, I would like I ask the question is what is the biggest stigma of Gary, and what would what would you do to convince someone to come out?
Oh, that's I think we do a great job when we have the kids there because then the kids realize that it's fun and then the parents will, want to take their kids. I think it's just coming out to a game one time. That's all that it takes.
Mhm.
I mean, we've got what, 10 police officers that wander the area, and there's never an issue that I've ever seen. So, um, it's definitely a safe place. I'd never question going. Uh, it's just going that first time.
And then outside of that, do you what other final thoughts do you have um before we wrap this all up?
I would first off, I would say that if somebody's watching this for the first time or what have you, uh, you do a great job of breaking some things down and really kind of not looking at it from a standpoint of a fan, but looking at it from a standpoint of kind of an outside perspective, but still a fan, right? And so you give a unique perspective of that. You don't pull the gloves off, which is great. But I also go back to that the podcast that you had right after we took the record for the most walks, and you looked so defeated. And I'm like, that is exactly how I'm feeling right now. So I appreciate that. You leave the emotions here and that, and that's great. We need more of that. So if this is the first time somebody's watching, go back and watch some of the other ones. You get some good stuff. And then from that point, how do we get more people to the steel yard? I mean, this really is a gem that we have. And going back to the first comments, you could sit there and waste 35, $50 on a ticket to the Cubs and listen to the profanities and listen to the drunk people and what have you, and really have a bad experience with your kids, right? Or you could go and spend $20, $30 on the south side and get to see some baseball, but you're not close to the action. You can go to Gary and you can see great baseball. It's like $12 a ticket.
Hmm.
The food is very reasonable and it's good, and you can go there and really have a great experience with your kids. and create those great memories. Just like with Milo, right? He gets to go on the dugout and stuff like that. But just taking your kid to the baseball and to the game and helping them love baseball. So many kids there just enjoying themselves, and that I think is kind of an unspoken thing that doesn't get talked about. We need to really increase that traffic or that knowledge of what's there.
And that's the one main objective of this podcast is to help out the one for me to get back into what I want to do, but two to help out the gym that we do have in Gary. And I think the city of Gary is trying to turn that around, and I think Northwest Indiana in general is trying to turn that around. I think we just got to the point to Gary's so far ran down that they're trying to flip it. But I think that the one stable force is the RailCats, and it's a gem in disguise, and it's just the best experience that you're gonna get.
And I'll sit there and no matter what team it is, Gary or not, right? But I'll see these guys after a win or after a loss, sit there signing 20, 30, 40 autographs for kids, and pulling a baseball out of their pocket, giving it to a kid and signing for them, or broken bat or whatever it is. I mean, these guys really, really do help kids enjoy baseball.
Yes. They understand how to promote themselves, but also the league they play in, because you
Just the
have to.
sport, right?
Yeah.
Just the sport as a whole.
Yes. That's you give a kid a baseball, you got a fan for life. That's how it goes.
I saw yesterday. This was interesting. Third baseman Ramon was his name for Winnipeg. He gave a kid a ball on the second game. That kid came back the third game and brought him a bead bracelet that said Goldeye on it.
Oh wow.
Give to him. He said the kid said, "You gave me a gift, so I have a gift for you." Right? And what you don't realize when you see that is that kid is just as happy about giving that gift to that player as they were receiving that baseball.
Yep.
Right? And so really, if we had more of that in the world, and I think that's why I spend so much time at the baseball field. I could be watching TV and seeing negative things, or I could be dealing with 9,000 other negative things, but I can go to the baseball field and I can kind of escape all of that, and I can see some really wonderful things going on.
Yeah. It's the beauty of sports, is it's the stories within the stories themselves that make it a true event to be at.
It is. And you're helping shape these kids' lives, and they love baseball and whatever. I mean, it's Steel Yard's the place to be, especially firework night.
Yes. But
and said, Kyle, I appreciate you having me on.
Yep,
And,
I really do appreciate you not one being a humble fan of the game, two being able to listen to me talk and me talk some stuff out of my butt, and you kind of reel me back in with it and in your point of views, and just being a good person in general. So I just want to thank you on that portion of it, and taking more than 2 hours out of your day to jump on a podcast and just talk some baseball. And I just want to thank Chuck again for joining the show. He kind of came up with the plan, as I kind of talked about earlier in the podcast, and we continued to talk for another 2 hours after this. So that's why the ending is a little bit odd. I had to cut it off at an odd point, just because he didn't ask me questions. He had questions for me, but we talked so long and got involved in so much that I was unable to answer his questions. So that will be a bonus episode coming out sometime this week or potentially next week. There's nothing to really put in, there's nothing that is relevant to the Winnnipeg series or the games coming up, so there's nothing special that needs to be hurried. So it'll be a bonus episode. I know I'm rambling on. I've been rambling on for about 4 hours now. So, But again, I want to thank Chuck. Had a great time. Really opened my eyes to a lot of things. I hope you guys also learn a few things to take in consideration. Host families, just being a fan in general, getting out to the steel yard, getting experiences. And if you have made it this far, I would love to hear your guys' experiences and get to know anyone and everyone that wants to talk about RailCats baseball. That's why I'm here to help talk about it, get people's point of views and things along the lines of that. I'm hoping to get more things going on the podcast, more interviews, more in-depth stuff to kind of shift out of the fan portion of it into actual coverage of the team, as something that I've been trying to do for the past 3 seasons. So we'll see how that works out on that front. If you're interested in following Chuck, it's Chuck for President on Twitter. I think that's the only place that he's really at. So if you're interested in following him, he comes up with crazy random things that happen on Twitter and stuff like that. And if you see him at a game, walk up to him, say hi, say you listen to the podcast, and give him your thoughts, give me my thoughts. We're always welcome to open conversations. And I'll probably have Chuck on more, maybe as a part-time co-host on that portion of it as well. If you are interested in maybe joining the show and wanting to share your stories and thoughts and stuff like that, don't be afraid to send me an email or a Facebook message, Twitter, Instagram, whatever the case may be, and I can get something rolling and we can go from there. But that's going to wrap it up for me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, rest of your evening whenever you're watching this, and go Cats.
He gets it high in the air, left field, this one's got a chance, and let's go on a cow